this video we will review some facts about Ohio. But before we start, please like this video, comment which video you want to see next and subscribe to our channel for future updates. Ohio is a vital state in the United States. It's an industrial powerhouse, and many notable personalities in American history and even pop culture have called Ohio home. Discover more with these 70 Ohio facts. Ohio's terrain is distinctive. To begin with, its location has become a crossroads for trade and travel between the American Northeast and the Midwest. To the east lies Pennsylvania, to the southeast is West Virginia, to the south is Kentucky, to the west is Indiana, and to the northwest is Michigan. Ohio's northern boundary is defined by Lake Erie, which expands the state's commercial capability, particularly through the port cities of Cleveland and Toledo. Similarly, the Ohio River defines the state's southern boundary and increases its commercial capability through river trade and transit. Ironically, because of a U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1980, the majority of the Ohio River now legally belongs to Kentucky and West Virginia. Ohio owns just the section of the river between the existing high water mark and a low water mark from 1792. The state is prone to earthquakes. Ohio is part of the Southern Great Lakes Seismic Zone and even has its own seismic zone, the Western Ohio Seismic Zone. Since 1776, scientists have detected an estimated 200 earthquakes in Ohio. Nonetheless, most of them are hardly felt by people of the state, with the biggest documented quake occurring in 1937. The quake, which had its epicenter in western Ohio, had a magnitude of 5.4 and affected the community of Anna in Shelby County. The 1884 Lima earthquake, with a magnitude of 4.8, was another large quake in Ohio. There's also the 1901 Portsmouth earthquake of magnitude 4.1 and the 1986 Leroy earthquake. The magnitude 5 Leroy earthquake generated aftershocks of up to magnitude 2.4 for the next 2 months. Campbell Hill is the highest peak in the state. Campbell Hill, located in the city of Bellefontaine, rises to a height of 472 meters. During the Cold War, the U.S. Air Force established Bellefontaine Air Force Station atop the hill in 1951. They built an early warning radar for the 664th Aircraft Control and Warning Squadron there. NORAD's establishment in 1958 resulted in a shift in military policy, and the U.S. Air Force deactivated Bellefontaine Air Force Station in 1969. The hill is now occupied by the Ohio High Point Career Center, and has done so since 1974. In 2015, a petition to rename the hill after former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin was presented to the White House. Ohio has a very consistent climate. The majority of Ohio has a humid continental climate, with hot and humid summers and chilly to freezing winters. Southern Ohio is an anomaly, with a humid subtropical climate that has hot and humid summers and moderate winters. Temperatures in the state may reach 45 degrees Celsius in the summer and 39 degrees below zero in the winter. Tornadoes also impact the state on occasion, however Ohio is not located in Tornado Alley in North America. In the winter, severe snowstorms frequently hit Ohio's coasts around Lake Erie, earning the region the moniker, Snowbelt. The state has several symbols. Among these is the spotted salamander, Ohio's official state amphibian. There's also the official state bird, the cardinal, and the official state flower, the red carnation. The ladybug is Ohio's official state insect, while the white-tailed deer is its official state animal. The official state reptile is the black racer snake, while the official state tree is the Buckeye tree. The official state beverage is tomato juice, and the official state fossil is the Isotellus maximus, a trilobite fossil from the Ordovician period roughly 485 million years ago. The Ohio flint is also the state gemstone of Ohio. The Adena culture are the first known inhabitants of what would become Ohio. They initially appeared around 500 BC and expanded throughout Ohio and the adjacent areas throughout the following centuries. Archaeologists have discovered Adena culture artifacts in Indiana, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. The Adena culture predominantly used stone tools and weaponry, but archaeologists have discovered copper axes and jewelry. Archaeologists have also discovered tablets with various geometric patterns, the function of which is unknown. Some archaeologists believe the Adena used the tablets as stamps or to sketch tattoo patterns before sticking them to their bodies. The Adena culture also left a number of earthworks in the shape of mounds across the territories they inhabited before vanishing in the 1st century AD. The Adena culture left behind the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. The mound, which is located in Adams County, Ohio, gets its name from its appearance, a long, twisting earthwork that resembles a snake. Scientists have dated the Serpent Mound crater to roughly 320 BC by following the path of the Ohio Brush Creek. Other evidence implies that while Edina erected the mound, it was renovated by succeeding cultures in the 11th century. They specifically mention a supernova occurrence in that century, as well as a visit by Halley's Comet. This has prompted experts to believe that the mound's contemporary look may differ from its original appearance as created by the Edina. Instead, other cultures modified the mound to celebrate Halley's Comet as it passed through the sky. Following the extinction of the Edina culture, many cultures arose. This includes the Hopewell culture, which emerged approximately 100 BC and spread into Ohio after the Edinas vanished. Some researchers believe that the Hopewell culture descended from the Edinas. The Hopewell culture died out about the 8th century, and the Mississippian culture arose in its place. Oral traditions from the Sioux assert lineage from Mississippian culture and rule over Ohio until the 13th century. Archaeologists have also discovered evidence of other cultures living alongside the Mississippians in Ohio at the time. Among these are the Fort Ancient people, who may have been Shawnees. The Whittlesea Focus people and the Monongahela culture are two more. By the 17th century, all of these cultures had vanished or fled Ohio. In the mid-17th century, the Iroquois took control of the region. This led in the Beaver Wars, in which the Iroquois fought against other Native Americans over the right to supply and sell fur to Europeans. The Iroquois allied with the Dutch, who sought a monopoly on the North American fur trade. Despite French backing, the Erie, Huron, Mohican, and other Native American peoples were pushed from Ohio by Iroquois from New England. The struggle stopped only after the British and Dutch were expelled from North America, depriving the Iroquois of their backing. However, at that time, the Iroquois had already taken possession of Ohio. In 1787, the United States incorporated Ohio in the new Northwest Territory. This was the outcome of the Northwest Ordinance and comprised not just contemporary Ohio, but also modern Indiana. When the U.S. government compelled the Native American Western Confederation to relinquish territory in the region in 1795, the Northwest Territory expanded even farther. The Northwest Ordinance also prohibited slavery in the area, while simultaneously acknowledging the potential of territories becoming states if their populations reached 60,000 or more. In reality, the Ohio country would be recognized as having taken the first step towards statehood in 1801. Despite the fact that Ohio had a population of only 45,000 people at the time. At the time, the U.S. government also settled veterans in the region. This was the product of the efforts of General Rufus Putnam, who oversaw the construction of fortifications during the American Revolution. He and Manasseh Cutler spearheaded the drive to establish the Northwest Territory after the war. Putnam expressly endorsed the campaign on the grounds that property should be allocated to war veterans. This would be in return for their service during the American Revolution. In reality, military veterans created Marietta City, Ohio's first post-revolutionary community. Putnam, a devout Puritan, also advocated for educational initiatives in the new region, and he was successful in having grounds officially dedicated for schools. He eventually served as a judge in the First Court of the Northwest Territory. In 1802, he was also a delegate to the conference that wrote Ohio's state constitution. All of this earned him the moniker, Father of Ohio. Until 1953, the U.S. Congress did not issue a resolution recognizing Ohio's statehood. That's not to argue there's no legal foundation for Ohio's statehood. In 1803, the U.S. Congress ratified the state constitution of Ohio. The U.S. Congress simply never recognized Ohio as the 17th state of the Union, since this practice began in 1812, with the statehood of Louisiana as the 18th state of the Union. This information was finally uncovered by historians in 1953, when Ohio began planning for its 150th anniversary. As a result, the Ohio state legislature drafted and passed legislation to recognize them as the 17th state in the Union. To commemorate the event, they dated the bill back to 1803 and had it brought to Washington, D.C. on horseback. In August 1953, the law was ratified by the United States Congress. Ohio shifted its capital multiple times in the early 19th century. Chillicothe was Ohio's first capital when it became a state in 1803 and remained so until 1810. As part of a compromise in the passage of certain measures that year, the state legislature relocated the capital to Zanesville. Zanesville served as the state capital for barely 2 years before the state government relocated to Chillicothe in 1812. It remained the state capital for another 4 years, until the state government relocated it to Columbus, Indiana, the geographic center of Ohio, in 1816. This was the final migration, with Columbus serving as the state capital of Ohio from 1816 until the present. During the 19th century, the state became the heart of the American steel industry. Ohio's first industrial ironworks debuted in Youngstown in 1804, followed by others around the state in the following decades. The state's substantial coal reserves aided the establishment of the iron and steel industry, which had 48 blast furnaces by the 1850s. The majority of them were in southern Ohio. However, by 1853, Cleveland in northern Ohio had risen to become the third largest producer of iron and steel in the United States. In fact, Ohio's Cleveland Rolling Mill Company was one of 3 corporations that united to establish the metallurgical behemoth U.S. Steel, which is still one of the world's major steel manufacturers today. Later, the Otis Steel Company erected the first open hearth furnace in Cleveland, and by 1892, the state had become the second largest producer of iron and steel in the United States. In 1835, Ohio and Michigan even waged a war against one another. The Toledo War, which occurred between 1835 and 1836 over a stretch of territory between Ohio and Michigan. Despite its name, no one died or was injured during this conflict. And, when bullets were fired, they were only warning shots. Under pressure from the U.S. Congress, the states eventually compromised. The Toledo Strip remained in Ohio, but Michigan gained land in the Upper Peninsula reaching into Lake Michigan. During the Civil War, Ohio made several contributions to the Union. Ohio produced 3 of the Union's greatest generals, Ulysses Grant, William Sherman, and Philip Sheridan. During the Civil War, 35,000 soldiers from Ohio fought and died for the Union. Another 30,000 troops from Ohio were injured throughout the war. When Confederate General Stonewall Jackson attacked Washington, D.C. in 1862, 5,000 volunteers from Ohio pledged to protect the city. The Ohio River was used extensively to transport supplies and troops to the front lines. The same could be said about the state's railways. Ohio's industries were equally important, with most of the steel required to manufacture firearms and bullets for the Union Army coming from the state. During the 20th century, Ohio became particularly famous for its celebrities. The Superman series originated in Ohio in the 1930s, with Jerry Spiegel and Joe Shuster's work published by Action Comics. They did so in response to the growth of fascism in Europe and Asia, as well as the emergence of Nazi Germany. Indeed, many of Superman's early chapters featured the superhero fighting and destroying Nazis. Warner Brothers was founded in Ohio and eventually relocated to California. Steven Spielberg, who directed films such as Jaws, E.T., and the Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park series, among others, was born in Ohio. Dean Martin, the O'Jays, and Dave Grohl are all famous Ohio musicians. It also became notorious for its participation in the 1970s anti-war demonstrations. The May 4th massacre at Kent State University in 1970, in particular. The protest occurred when the United States invaded Cambodia as part of a larger anti-communist effort in Southeast Asia centered on the Vietnam War. Although the demonstration began peacefully, it swiftly escalated into protesters attacking police, government buildings, and other symbols of power. This prompted the proclamation of a state of emergency and the arrival of the National Guard to restore order. On May 4, after the demonstrators refused to disperse and began hurling rocks and bottles at the National Guard, the guardsmen opened fire. As a result, 4 demonstrators were killed and 9 others were seriously injured. The shooting sparked significant indignation in the United States, fueling the emerging anti-war movement. Ohio was heavily damaged by the Great Recession of the 2000s. It all started in 2005, when the housing bubble burst, causing the prices of houses and other landed properties to plummet across the United States. This resulted in a high number of people defaulting on their mortgages, triggering a financial crisis that forced banks to declare bankruptcy or seek government bailouts. In Ohio, the Great Recession generated an estimated 377,000 job losses and established a state record of 89,053 foreclosures in 2009. Also that year, the state poverty rate surged to 13.5%, while average family incomes in the state decreased by 7%. Columbus, the state capital of Ohio, dates back to pre-colonial times. Archaeological evidence suggests that Native Americans lived in what would become the Columbus metropolitan area as early as 1000 BC. These include mounds from the Adena, Hopewell, and Fort ancient cultures. With the exception of the Shrum Mound, the most of these mounds are located beyond the municipal limits of Columbus. Regardless of their location, all of the mounds are protected as public parks and historical landmarks. Europeans would not arrive at Columbus until the 17th century, when French traders established an outpost there. British traders were briefly present in the 1740s before being driven out by the French. However, following the 7 Years' War, the British would push the French out of not only Columbus, but the whole state of Ohio. It is named after the legendary explorer Christopher Columbus. In reality, it is the world's largest city named after the explorer, albeit it is unknown who named it. The most popular version among historians relates the city's naming to great respect for Christopher Columbus among the city's earliest permanent immigrants. It has, however, sparked debate since the late 20th century, with Native Americans, in particular, condemning the name. They demonstrate how Columbus's discovery of the New World facilitated colonization, imperialism, and slavery. This resulted in the dismantling of many Columbus memorials across the city in the 1990s. As part of the 2020 George Floyd protests, efforts were even made to rename the city. Columbus battled with its position early in its existence. This is due to the city's proximity to the Scioto and Olentangy rivers. In reality, the first permanent community in the area, established in 1797, survived barely a year before being washed out by a flood in 1798. Although the settlers rebuilt their hamlet, the water compelled them to construct further inland than they had anticipated. Floods were still a severe threat, as was sickness induced by the region's moist and humid climate. Malaria, in particular, was quite prevalent during the period, as was cholera. This compelled the city government to create a Board of Health in 1833, which subsequently evolved into the contemporary Columbus Public Health Department. From the 1850s onward, the city became an important railway center. It began with the Columbus and Xenia Railroad, which was finished in 1850 and connected Columbus with the town of Xenia. Other railways followed in 1851, connecting Columbus to the cities of Cleveland and Cincinnati. By the 1860s, Columbus's role as a national transportation center had led to it being a stop on the Underground Railroad. While not a physical railroad, it refers to several clandestine routes used by runaway slaves from the southern United States to reach the northern states. Later, the Civil War aided the expansion of both the state and city railroads. By 1875, 8 distinct railroads connected Columbus to other towns and states. In the early 20th century, the city became well known for its arches. So much so that it earned the moniker Arch City, which dates back to 1888, when the city constructed arches to light its streets as part of a Civil War veterans convention. Over the next few decades, Columbus used wooden arches to place lighting, particularly along High Street. They eventually utilized the arches to carry the electrical cables that powered the electric trams that were part of the city's public transportation system. The arches were demolished in 1914 due to advancements in street lighting and electric transmission. This, however, sparked a popular outcry, and locals have subsequently grown to see the arches as part of the city's heritage. However, it would be 2002 before the arches were recreated from metal as part of a city-wide commemoration of the city's historical past. In 1913, the city was ravaged by a flood. The Great Flood of 1913, which occurred between March 23 and March 26 that year. Heavy rainfall in the eastern and central United States led rivers to flood and exceed their banks. In the end, the estimated death toll was 650 persons. Ohio suffered the worst, with up to 470 people dying in the state alone. 90 of the deaths occurred in Columbus, leaving thousands homeless. This finally led to an intervention by the U.S. Army, whose engineers devised strategies to prevent future flooding in the city. These included expanding the river, constructing new bridges, and erecting floodwalls along the banks. These ideas would not be implemented until after World War I and the economy had recovered. The 2010 foreclosure crisis wreaked havoc on Columbus. This is a widespread improper foreclosure by banks across the United States, often known as Foreclosure Gate. Federal inquiries, legal cases, and even initiatives by the U.S. Congress are then launched to improve foreclosure legislation. However, the harm had already been done, with investor trust in the banking industry damaged. In Columbus alone, the municipal government had to buy out all of the wrongfully foreclosed properties, costing the city's taxpayers millions of dollars. By the time the city had brought the problem under control in 2011, it was left with an estimated 6,000 unoccupied properties. Protests were held in Columbus in the aftermath of George Floyd's death in 2020. Protests were mostly held in downtown Columbus, as well as the short north and the south side. They began on May 28, barely 3 days after George Floyd's death in Minneapolis. Although the protests began peacefully, it didn't take long for them to grow violent and transform into riots. By May 30, an estimated 100 establishments in Columbus had been vandalized by rioters, leading the municipal authorities to enforce a curfew. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine also stepped in, deploying the National Guard to assist preserve peace in the city. This was successful in halting the violence, yet the demonstrations persisted, with police and even government officials taking part. Cincinnati is another large city in Ohio. In 1788, Matthias Denham, Israel Ludlow, and Robert Patterson founded the first colony on what would become Cincinnati. In 1790, Arthur St. Clair renamed the hamlet Lesantiville after the Roman senator and Republican hero Cincinnati. Cincinnati grew rapidly as a result of river trade along the Ohio River, with cured pork being a prominent export. More than that, it established Cincinnati as a food processing hub at the time. In 1819, the community was formally acknowledged as a city. The population increased as well, from an estimated 10,000 in 1810 to an estimated 25,000 in 1830. Early in its history, the city established itself as a key transportation center. In addition to the Ohio River, the Miami and Erie Canal, which would connect the Ohio River with Lake Erie, began building in 1827. The canal, which was built in sections, connected Cincinnati with Middletown by 1827 and, upon completion in 1840, with Toledo on Lake Erie. The Little Miami Railroad was the first to branch out from Cincinnati in 1836. The Mad River and Lake Erie Railroads followed in the years that followed, connecting Cincinnati with Sandusky Bay on Lake Erie. The city's remarkable rise in size and population during this period earned it the moniker, Queen City, from its residents. Riots ravaged the city in 1884. The Cincinnati Courthouse riots, which occurred between March 28 and 30, that year. They exploded over the case of William Berner and Joe Palmer, who murdered their boss, William Kirk. Despite 7 witness statements indicating that they committed premeditated murder, the jury pushed the court to condemn Berner on a manslaughter charge. This sparked enormous public outcry, which was exacerbated by the fact that it was merely the latest in a string of miscarriages of justice during the previous decade. On March 28, a crowd assaulted the jailhouse with the intent of lynching Berner. When they couldn't find him, the crowd attempted to burn down the jailhouse and everyone inside. The conflict continued on May 29, and was exacerbated when numerous guards joined the rioters instead. Only the arrival of militia from Columbus put an end to the bloodshed, but even then, newspapers across the United States voiced support and sympathy for the rioters. The riots killed 56 individuals and injured 300 more. In 1937, the city was ravaged by a flood. Specifically, the 1937 Ohio River flood, which occurred between January and February of that year. The exact dates vary depending on the impacted areas, with the flood hitting Cincinnati between January 18 and February 5. The flood peaked on January 26 at a depth of 24.4 meters, compared to the river's typical maximum level of 16.8 meters. This submerged an estimated 31 kilometers to of the city, forcing the local authority to suspend electrical power for safety concerns. They also shut off public water services due to the flood potentially polluting the water pipes. Although an estimated 100,000 individuals lost their houses, just 10 people died as a result of the flood. The city has several nicknames. We've previously discussed Arch City and Queen City, but Cincinnati is also known as the City of Seven Hills. It is a reference to ancient Rome, much like the city's name, with the old city situated on top of and surrounding 7 hills. Cincinnati, like Rome, is built on and around 7 hills: Mount Adams, Mount Auburn, College Hill, Fairmount, Price Hill, Vine Street Hill, and Walnut Hills. Other nicknames for the city include the Natty, which refers to a common abbreviation of its name. There's also the Queen of the West, Cincy, Blue Chip City, and Porkopolis, a nod to the city's past as a hub of pig processing and export. It is famed for its Cincinnati chili. It's a Mediterranean spiced beef sauce eaten over spaghetti noodles or hot dogs. This spice blend contains allspice, bay leaves, chili powder, cinnamon, cloves, cumin, and nutmeg. Some recipes even use soupy and unsweetened dark chocolate. Immigrants created the sauce in the 1920s, and it became popular in the 1930s. It is still considered one of America's top 20 iconic foods. While some reviewers have compared it to chili con carne, specialists believe it is more akin to Greek pasta sauces. Cincinnati chili is also served with a variety of toppings, the combinations of which have become known as ways. The most popular combination is the three-way, which includes shredded cheese in the sauce and spaghetti noodles. The two-way is the most basic combination, consisting of sauce and spaghetti noodles. There's also the four-way, which adds onions to the ordinarily three-way mix, and the five-way, which adds onions and beans. Other well-known foods have also originated in Cincinnati. These include goetta, a pork and grain sausage popularized by German immigrants to the city in the 19th century. The meat is generally composed of pork, but beef variations are sometimes available. The grain is made of pinhead oats, and the sausage is flavored with salt, pepper, rosemary, and thyme. Another renowned Cincinnati food is fake turtle soup, which was popularized by German immigrants to the city in the 19th century. The dish employs organ meats to mimic the texture and flavor of turtle meat. In reality, the typical meat element is calf's brain. Beef and hard-boiled eggs are also utilized in the meal. Ohio has a diversified population. Whites are expected to account for 80% of the population in 2020. German Americans make up the majority of whites, accounting for an estimated 27%. Irish Americans account for an estimated 14% of all whites, with Anglo-Americans accounting for just 9%. African Americans are the state's second largest ethnic group, accounting for around 14% of the population. Hispanics are third with an estimated 4%, followed by Asian Americans with 3%. Native Americans are the smallest single ethnicity, accounting for only around 1% of the population. The same is true for the faiths of the state. The different Protestant religions constitute the majority, accounting for around 53% of the state's population. Roman Catholics are 18% of the population, with other religions such as Buddhism, Islam, and Judaism each having 1% of the state's population. Another 22% of Ohioans claim to be unaffiliated with any religion. Nonetheless, a 2015 study revealed that religion was very significant to an estimated 56% of the state's population. Another 25% said it was just somewhat essential, while only 19% thought religion was insignificant. According to the same study, only 38% of Ohioans typically attend weekly religious services. Ohio has a significant presence in the aerospace and military industries. In actuality, the state's aerospace and military industries employ around 16,000 people. In terms of the number of workers in the industry, Ohio ranks 7th among U.S. states. Ohio is also ranked 6th in the United States for the manufacture of aerospace components and products. Aircraft Braking Systems, CFM International, GE Aviation, GE Honda Aero Engines, and the Goodrich Corporation are among the companies in this industry. Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon are all located in the state. Airbus is another non-military aircraft company with a presence in Ohio, having invested an estimated $4 billion in the state thus far. The state's major military goods include the M1 Abrams main battle tank, which is utilized by the U.S. military, as well as the Stryker FSV. In addition, the state has a strong agricultural industry. 1 in every 8 Ohioans works in the agriculture sector, which is worth an estimated $124 billion. The industry has elevated Ohio to the #1 producer of Swiss cheese in the United States. It is also the country's third largest egg producer. Ohio also features the country's third largest tomato industry. It is also the 6th largest producer of soybeans, the 8th largest producer of pork, and the 9th largest producer of maize. It also features the world's largest ketchup facility in Fremont City, Sandusky County. According to government figures, the state had 75,000 farms as of 2018. The state's oil business dates back to the 19th century as well. Although oil prospectors discovered oil in Ohio in 1836, commercial production did not begin until 1884. The oil business flourished quickly in the years that followed, with the Findlay Field soon joined by oil fields in Lima and Grand Lake. In less than 10 years, Grand Lake, in particular, would be tapped by over 100 wells. Ohio's early oil business peaked in 1896, with 24 million barrels of oil produced in a single year. Until 1903, the state was the leading producer of oil in the United States. Following then, California and Oklahoma swiftly surpassed the state. The oil business in Ohio began to vary. Worse, inefficient early oil extraction technologies lost a lot of oil and soon exhausted the reserves. Ohio is now the 17th largest oil producer in the United States, producing 5.55 million barrels of oil per year. Ohio also has huge coal and natural gas reserves. Commercial gas production in Ohio began in 1885, with the discovery of the Bowling Green gas reserves. Similarly to the early oil business, the early gas industry's poor tactics squandered a lot of gas while swiftly depleting the known gas supplies. Today, Ohio is anticipated to generate 2.41 billion cubic meters of gas per year, enough to heat an estimated 1 million houses. Ohio also produces an estimated 26 million tons of coal each year, ranking it 11th in the United States. As of 2010, numerous firms in Ohio had received governmental financing to explore coal-to-oil conversion. The state has also undertaken solar energy investments. Solar energy is expected to produce 500 megawatts of power for Ohio's requirements by 2021. Bowling Green is home to the state's largest solar farm, which was finished in 2017 and generates an estimated 20 megawatts of power. Other notable solar farms in the nation include a 12-megawatt solar farm erected in Upper Sandusky in 2010. Perrysburg also features one of the largest solar panel plants in the United States, capable of producing 600 megawatts of solar panels each year. The U.S. military in Ohio has also contributed to the solar energy industry, with the 180th Fighter Wing of the Ohio Air National Guard employing a 1.2 megawatt solar farm to provide all of its energy demands. Wind energy is also well supported in Ohio. Wind power has been used in Ohio since the 19th century, when Charles Brush erected an experimental wind turbine near Cleveland. Between 1886 and 1900, it produced an estimated 12 kilowatts of power per year. Wind power would not make a reappearance until the 1970s, when NASA developed experimental wind turbine technology in the state. Wind power now meets an estimated 2% of the state's energy demands, producing 738 megawatts of electricity every year. Blue Creek is Ohio's largest wind farm, with 152 turbines producing an estimated 304 megawatts of energy. There are also government-sponsored plans to increase the state's wind power generation by approximately 800 megawatts in the next years. Ohio is also known for being a pioneer in fuel cell technology. Because of the overwhelming number of enterprises in the field, Ohio has earned the moniker Fuel Cell Corridor. In 2007, Ohio State University students created the world's fastest fuel cell-powered car. In the state now, an estimated 800 enterprises make and research fuel cells, employing an estimated 60,000 people. Graphtec, the Hydrogen Corporation, Ovonic Battery Systems, and Rolls-Royce Fuel Systems are a few examples. Columbus City even gives fuel cell firms an estimated $33 million in incentives to invest in the city. This is in addition to the state government's $100 million in tax breaks. Other energy sources can also be found in Ohio. Geothermal energy is one of them, with Ohio having the world's first ground source heat pumps in 1948. With 5 hydroelectric facilities along the Ohio River, hydroelectricity has a presence in Ohio as well. Ohio also has 2 nuclear power reactors, with a third in the works. Piketon, Ohio, historically possessed a uranium enrichment facility that produced uranium products for both civilian and military purposes. In 2010, the French nuclear corporation Areva established a nuclear reprocessing plant to manage nuclear waste. Prospectors have remarked that Ohio's considerable uranium ore reserves provide the state's nuclear sector with excellent prospects for future growth. The state also boasts a strong vehicle industry. In reality, an Ohio native, Charles Kettering, devised the self-starter, which aided in the mainstreaming of automobiles and other vehicles. The vehicle business in Ohio is now worth an estimated $16 billion. It also accounts for around 14% of all vehicle production in the United States. This comprises an estimated 2 million automobiles, or 16% of all vehicles produced in the United States. General Motors, which produces the most automobiles in the state, an estimated 37%, is one of the state's automakers. Honda comes in second, accounting for an estimated 36% of all automobiles manufactured in Ohio. Daimler Chrysler and Ford are 2 more automakers with operations in Ohio. Other industries have a foothold in Ohio as well. The insurance business has a significant presence in the state, with Ohio ranking 6th among U.S. states in terms of the number of individuals employed in the field. In addition, the state has the 3rd highest number of claim examiners in the whole United States. Rubber and plastic industry also contribute significantly to the state economy. So much so that Ohio is the leading U.S. state in rubber and plastic manufacture. Yaskawa America, Robotics Research, and Fanuc Robotics America Inc. are among the robotics firms that operate in the state. W10f Steel in Cleveland boasts the largest laser welding plant in the United States, while Lockheed Martin manufactures laser-targeted sniper systems in Ohio. The state has a well-developed transportation infrastructure. In reality, the Lincoln Route, the first transcontinental highway in the United States, runs through Ohio. It connects New York City on the east coast to San Francisco on the west coast. In 1913, Ohio's main market Route 3 was added to the highway. U.S. Route 40, another transcontinental roadway in the United States, also travels through Ohio. The state also includes 4 international airports, the largest and busiest of which being Cleveland-Hopkins International Airport. In addition, the U.S. military operates 2 more important airports for its own purposes. Rickenbacker International Airport and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base are 2 examples. Ohio has produced 7 presidents for the United States. This gave the state the moniker, Mother of Presidents, which is only rivaled by the state of Virginia. Among these presidents is Ulysses Grant, who served as a commander in the Union Army during the Civil War. There's also Rutherford Hayes, who followed Grant as President of the United States when he completed his 2nd term. James Garfield, the 2nd U.S. president assassinated, was also from Ohio, as was Benjamin Harrison. William McKinley, the third U.S. president assassinated, was likewise from Ohio and had previously led the country in the Spanish-American and American-Philippine Wars. Both William Taft and Warren Harding were born in Ohio. It is well known for voting suppression. It began in 1994, when Ohio implemented a procedure that removed the names of infrequent voters from the list of registered voters. This resulted in a lawsuit in 2016 alleging that Ohio's voter policy violated a 1993 legislation and a 2002 law guaranteeing individuals' right to vote. A federal court found in favor of the state, but only for the 2016 U.S. elections. Even still, experts have determined that if the court had not decided as it did, thousands of Ohioans would have been unable to vote. They also accused the government of robbing an estimated 2 million individuals of their right to vote since 2011. This earned Ohio the distinction of being the 17th most difficult state to vote in the United States. Ohio is active in a variety of sports. In 1920, the American Professional Football Association, APFA, founded the National Football League, NFL. Today, the state is represented in the NFL by the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. Since the game's inception in 1967, Ohio has never won the Super Bowl. In other sports, the Cleveland Cavaliers represent the state in the NBA, while the Cincinnati Reds and Cleveland Guardians represent the state in Major League Baseball. Similarly, in Major League Soccer, the Columbus Crew SC and FC Cincinnati represent the state. The state also has a hockey team, the Columbus Blue Jackets, which plays in the National Hockey League. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to our channel, since we will be covering a lot of similar content in the future. Till next time, stay curious.